The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked neatly between court briefs and utility bills, as if it understood the balance my life had always required. Thick ivory paper. My son's name pressed into it with elegant navy lettering. Law school reception, honoring graduates and their families. I sat at my kitchen table longer than necessary, holding it in both hands. For a moment, I didn't see the invitation at all. I saw late nights when my son slept on the couch while I drafted opinions at the dining table. I saw cheap takeout containers, scholarship forms, student loan statements, and the quiet fear of wondering if I was doing enough, being enough, as both a mother and a woman with a demanding career. I had learned early that pride didn't come with applause. It came with endurance. On the evening of the reception, I chose a navy blue dress, tailored, modest, unremarkable to anyone who measured worth in labels. I left my judicial pin at home. Not out of shame, but habit. Titles were tools, not armor. I had never needed to announce myself to be certain of who I was. The law school building glowed with warm lights and polished glass. Laughter spilled out onto the steps. Parents in pressed suits and shimmering dresses clustered together, exchanging names, firms, and carefully rehearsed humility. I entered quietly. At the registration table, a young woman with a headset glanced at me, her eyes moving too quickly, taking inventory, making a decision. Her smile was professional but distant. "Catering staff this way," she said, pointing toward a side hallway without waiting for confirmation. For a second, I wondered if I had misheard. "I'm here for my son," I replied calmly, my voice steady from decades of courtrooms. She barely paused. "Yes, ma'am. Kitchen access is through there." Around us, conversations continued uninterrupted. No one noticed the exchange, or if they did, they didn't care enough to intervene. I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest, not anger, not embarrassment, but clarity. This was not a mistake. This was assumption. I followed the direction she indicated, my heels clicking softly against the floor. With each step, memories surfaced, times I had been underestimated, talked over, mistaken for an assistant, a clerk, a placeholder. I had corrected them then. Firmly. Immediately. But tonight, something held me back. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was exhaustion. Or perhaps it was the quiet understanding that sometimes, the truest measure of a room is how it treats you when it believes you have no power at all. The hallway narrowed, the music faded, and the smell of lemon cleaner replaced perfume and wine. I stopped near the open doorway of the kitchen, watching servers rush past me without a glance. From here, I could still see the reception hall. My son stood laughing with his classmates, unaware. Proud. Radiant. I straightened my shoulders. I could walk back out there and correct them all in a single sentence. I could end the confusion, reclaim my place, command respect the way I had done countless times before. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed where I was, heart calm, hand steady, letting the moment reveal exactly what it was meant to teach, about them, and about me. Because I had learned something long ago, a lesson the law itself respects. You never show your cards too early. The kitchen pulsed with movement, a small universe hidden behind polished doors. Trays clattered, burners hissed, and voices rose and fell in practiced urgency. No one questioned my presence. To them, I was already filed away, part of the background, another woman meant to clean, carry, or disappear when asked. I stood near the doorway, my back straight, my hands folded neatly in front of me. Years on the bench had trained me well. Observation was a discipline. Silence, a strategy. A server brushed past me, murmuring a quick apology without meeting my eyes. Another asked if I needed gloves. I smiled and declined. Each interaction reinforced the same quiet conclusion: once people decide who you are, they stop looking for evidence to the contrary. That's when I heard him. His voice cut through the kitchen noise with the smooth authority of a man used to being heard. Educated. Comfortable. Certain of his place in the world. "Can we keep that cleaning lady away from the main hall?" he said, not bothering to lower his voice. This is a professional event. We don't need distractions. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew exactly who he was, the girlfriend's father. I had noticed him earlier in the hall, surrounded by admirers, his laughter too loud, his confidence carefully rehearsed. A man who mistook proximity to power for possession of it. The words landed heavier than the earlier assumption. Cleaning lady. Not staff. Not worker. Lady, said the way people say problem. For the briefest moment, I felt the weight of every woman who had stood in rooms like this, qualified, accomplished, invisible. I thought of my mother, who cleaned offices at night so I could study during the day. I thought of how she used to say, they see the uniform, not the soul. My credentials rested in my bag, folded and official. One movement. One sentence. That was all it would take. Federal judge. This event exists because people like me protect institutions like yours. I imagined his face blanching. The apologies. The panic. The satisfaction. But satisfaction is not the same as justice. I stayed still. Because something else had become clear in that moment, this was no longer about correcting an insult. This was about letting a belief expose itself fully, without interference. If I spoke now, he would learn only that he had insulted the wrong woman. If I waited, he might learn that he had insulted the idea of dignity itself. The kitchen door swung open, letting in a burst of music and laughter. I caught a glimpse of my son across the room, his face animated, unaware of the quiet trial unfolding just beyond the walls. I inhaled slowly. Restraint is not weakness. It is the confidence that truth does not require immediate defense. The girlfriend's father continued speaking, unaware that his words were being recorded, not by devices, but by memory. People need to know their place, he added casually, as if discussing seating arrangements instead of humanity. I almost smiled. Because I knew exactly where my place was. Not in the kitchen. Not in the shadows. But at the center of a reckoning he had unknowingly scheduled for himself. I adjusted my grip on my clutch and stepped slightly farther back, letting the door close partway. Letting the room return to its assumptions. The law had taught me many things, but one lesson rose above all others, sharp and unyielding. When someone underestimates you, do not rush to correct them. Let them build the case. The reception continued as if the kitchen and its whispered judgments didn't exist, and in many ways, it didn't, at least not for those who measured life by appearances. Wine glasses clinked in practiced rhythms, laughter punctuated conversations, and servers drifted silently among clusters of parents and graduates, carrying trays of delicate hors d'oeuvres. I remained near the doorway, unseen but acutely aware, watching a room built on expectation and ceremony unfold like a stage play. My son was radiant. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned his achievements, unspoiled by the arrogance of others. I felt a surge of pride so strong it made the tension of the earlier insult almost laughable. And yet, I waited, knowing that pride alone was not the currency I intended to use tonight. Patience was. Observation. Timing. The dean took the podium, his voice warm and formal. Tonight, we honor our graduates, he said, scanning the room, eyes briefly landing on me without recognition. And the families who supported them every step of the way. Applause rippled through the hall. I noticed the girlfriend's father, seated near the front, chest straight, a small smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. I reminded myself, the performance is always half confidence, half ignorance. Graduates were called forward, one by one. Names were read, honors acknowledged, handshakes exchanged. Parents lined the perimeter, offering polite applause and restrained smiles. I watched each moment, silent, absorbing the hierarchy of assumptions, noting who held power, who assumed it, and who relied on superficial titles to declare their place. Then came my son. His name rang clear over the speakers, a sound I had memorized long before tonight, uttered in courtrooms and quiet conversations alike. He stepped forward, posture impeccable, eyes sweeping across the room. And then, deliberately, he looked at me, not the young woman who had directed me to the kitchen, not the father who had insulted me, but me. "And now," the dean said, "we'd like to recognize someone special." The room's chatter softened, an anticipatory hush descending. I saw the girlfriend's father shift in his seat, unaware of the storm gathering silently in the space between words. "My mother," my son began, voice steady and resonant, "taught me that dignity doesn't announce itself. That strength is measured not by how loudly we correct injustice, but by how patiently we wait for the truth to reveal itself. Without her guidance, her sacrifice, and her relentless example, I would not be standing here tonight." Silence fell hard and sharp, slicing through the soft clatter of glasses and chairs. Heads turned toward me. Eyes widened. Recognition dawned slowly. The staff, the parents, the students, they all saw me in a new light, not as a guest, not as an observer, not as a background figure, but as the woman who had shaped the man they were honoring. The girlfriend's father's confident smirk faltered. He swallowed, red creeping to his neck, as the weight of what he had assumed crashed against reality. I stood tall near the doorway, my clutch still in my hand, and for the first time that evening, I allowed myself the faintest curve of a smile. I had not raised my voice. I had not announced my credentials. I had not stormed the room. And yet, in this long table, in this formal hall, the truth had found its place. They had assumed. They had underestimated. And finally, they were learning the lesson they could not deny. Because power, real power, is not shown too early. It waits. And when it moves with inevitability. The aftermath of the revelation was subtle but unmistakable. Apologies fluttered like hesitant birds, awkward and too late, landing where they were least expected. The girlfriend's father approached first, his carefully maintained composure cracking as he extended a hand, trembling slightly. I had no idea," he stammered, the rehearsed arrogance of earlier replaced by an unfamiliar, uncomfortable humility. I looked at him steadily, my posture unchanged. My hands were clean, not from lack of labor, but from deliberate restraint. "I know," I said, my voice soft but edged with clarity. "That's the point. No need for theatrics. No need for vengeance masquerading as humility. The lesson had been delivered with precision, dignity cannot be stripped by assumption, and recognition cannot be delayed by arrogance." He understood, whether he wanted to or not, that some moments cannot be undone, and some truths cannot be ignored. Around me, the room had shifted imperceptibly but irreversibly. Whispers replaced murmurs. Eyes that had skimmed me for irrelevance now met mine with acknowledgement. Even the catering staff, who had passed by without notice, glanced up, some with tentative curiosity, others with cautious respect. I realized then that power rarely demands attention. It quietly reorders the room without forcing a single hand to clap. My son came to my side shortly after, placing a gentle hand on my arm. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For everything. For waiting. For showing me how to carry myself in a world that sometimes refuses to see what is right in front of it." His words were enough. They always are. Children, when raised with patience and integrity, see far more than anyone expects. I let them linger in that acknowledgement for a moment, savoring the quiet satisfaction of having stayed true to myself. There would be no vindictive remarks, no hasty displays of authority. Those were easy. Easy had never been my measure. What mattered was patience, composure, and the unwavering certainty that justice, in its own time, would arrive. The girlfriend's father lingered, perhaps searching for a chance to redeem himself, but the moment had passed. The lesson was not for him to savor, it was to remember, silently, uncomfortably, like a stain on fine china that refused to be wiped away. I allowed him the space to understand it without guiding him, because learning, especially when delayed by one's own arrogance, is always more enduring. Later, when the hall began to empty and the formalities concluded, I stepped outside into the cool night air. I inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the day settle and release in equal measure. The city lights stretched across the skyline, indifferent yet familiar. My reflection in the glass of the lobby door showed a woman unbowed, composed, and infinitely aware of her worth. Power, I reminded myself once more, does not need applause to exist. It does not need recognition to be real. And true authority never has to shout, because it moves in ways others can only realize after the fact. I turned, walking away from the reception with my head held high, the click of my heels measured and deliberate. I carried with me not only the pride of my son's accomplishment, but the knowledge that every slight, every assumption, every dismissive glance had been catalogued and rendered powerless. Tonight, they had learned what I had known all along: patience sharpens memory, dignity carries weight, and showing your cards too early only teaches lessons too soon. I smiled quietly to myself. The world had learned something, yes, but I had learned, once again, that restraint is the quietest, most absolute form of revenge.